What's the difference between us? We just started the cleaning.
What is up, guys? Concrete Breakdowns coming at you with a breakdown straight out of Stockton today. Hit the like and subscribe button for the 209. The Diaz brothers are two well-respected and famous fighters who have made their names in mixed martial arts. Many people love them for their characters, their anti-establishment personas, and because the guys were ahead of the curve on subjects like fighter pay, cannabis, and steroid use in MMA. The older brother Nick Diaz is retired now, probably, and considered a legend and a pioneer. The younger brother Nate is still an active fighter and has turned into a giant pay-per-view draw. The brothers have had very different paths in MMA and also have different personalities. Nick obviously dealing with more social anxiety than Nate, for example. But I do breakdowns on fighting and not so much psychology or marketability. When it comes to fighting, the two brothers are often mentioned in the same breath. You hear analysis like, Fighter X does this and this Diaz style. When you're fighting a Diaz, you should do such and such. The Diaz brothers as fighters are always mentioned as if they are one and the same. They're practically the same fighter and supposedly only fighting in different weight divisions. Well, to me it's clear as day that these guys are very different fighters. I tried to find a video on YouTube pointing these differences out, but surprisingly didn't find any. So this is me making that video. Let's first cover the similarities between the brothers as fighters, so we can later shift to the differences. So despite the subject of this video, these two rebellious potheads straight out of the 209 do have a lot of common as fighters. Nick and Nate are both high-level black belts in BJJ. Not every black belt is the same. The Diaz's are up there among the best as high chair, Cesar Gracie black belts. Their BJJ is mostly used to put people in trouble who aren't liking the stand-up portion of the game no more. In the stand-up, both Diaz brothers use mostly their boxing on offense. Their high-paced boxing is supported by their immense cardiovascular ability. Both Nick and Nate partake in regular triathlons and other endurance sports as part of their MMA training. Building slow-twitch muscle fibers from long-distance training has its drawbacks, as you don't quite see either Diaz brothers lifting opponents over their heads and slamming them down in fights. Explosive strength is not their forte, but they enjoy many benefits of having this endurance base. Their ability to keep throwing a high volume of strikes deep into the later rounds of fights is a giant asset they have built their games around. So we can put a check next to high volume pressure boxing with excellent BJJ for both Diaz's. Another thing both brothers are famous for is their rock solid chins and durability. They have survived shots that will put down many hard-nosed professional fighters. It's always a question what exactly makes a fighter durable. The mindset to put up with pain and push through compromising effects of damage, their ability to recover granted by their endurance training. There could be a genetic component, having the type of brain and body that is better suited to receive damage. Probably all of the above, but whatever the case is, it's certain the Diaz brothers can take a freaking shot. Both Diaz's are also known for shit talking during their fights. Many opponents have actually confessed how much that got to them and influenced their mindsets in the fight. There's certainly a mental warfare component to flipping someone off after smacking them across the face. And the brothers also share some common weaknesses. The bladed boxing stance have left them vulnerable to leg kick heavy game plans, which a lot of opponents have taken advantage of. Their more slow twitch physiques also leave them vulnerable for fighters with quick footwork and strong wrestling. So at this point you might be thinking, dang, that's a solid list of similarities. I kind of see why the two are compared so often. But while acknowledging the similarities are certainly there, the differences are just as plenty. Allow me to quickly walk you through the example of two twins learning combat sports. Let's take two monozygotic, completely identical twins with completely the same body down to the very structure of their cells. Same bone density in their shins, same amount of muscle mass on their lats, same strength of the ligaments in their knees. When we're talking athletic strengths and weaknesses, two completely identical people. These two identical brothers have the same trainer, train the exact same amount, and start practicing combat sports at the same time. You'd figure these guys would be two completely similar fighters, right? But that's actually not the case. You see, most of your fundamental development as a fighter is done during your first months of sparring. As you can imagine, even though brothers A and B are so similar, they can't spar the same sparring partners at the same time, and they won't have the exact same rounds of sparring even when they do find the same sparring partners. So let's say our two identical brothers have good mechanical aptitude for throwing a right overhand. They throw it hard and fast. Brother A might, just by happenstance and how the rotation of sparring partners goes, land his right hand early in his first couple of sparring rounds. This will cause a positive affirmation for applying pressure with his right hand, which Brother A will naturally start building on. By building on his right hand as a tool to come forward and apply pressure with, he'll develop a habit and pattern. He'll also automatically start building skills linked to leading with a right hand, like entries into striking range or follow-up shots for his right hand. So Brother A is more inclined towards early pressure with his right hand because of early imprintement he had in sparring. Now let's say Brother B does not enjoy the same early success just because of his roll of the dice of sparring partners. He might spar a few more guys who are defensively cautious and whiff on his early attempts at landing a right hand. Brother B gets sucked into slower paced sparring rounds and finds a way to land his right hand on the back foot as a counter later on in rounds. Brother B will on his turn naturally build on this positive affirmation and consequently build skills linked to countering. Now this is not to say that Brother A will never learn how to counter and Brother B will never learn how to pressure, but there will always be a natural inclination towards the one or the other. Fights are all about habits and patterns. Even though the brothers have the same body, got taught the same style by the same trainer, they will build different habits with a different set of strengths and weaknesses. When fighting Brother A, you will have to solve a different set of problems than when you're fighting Brother B. The reason I offer this example is that it shows that even these identical clones can end up quite different as fighters, which in turn accentuates the potential in contrast between the fight style of the Diazes. The Diaz brothers are obviously not monozygotic identical twins. They are not similar to the cellular level, meaning they have pretty different physical attributes. They also did not start training at the exact same time and have not always had the same set of opponents, trainers and sparring partners, and consequently built very different techniques and strategies along the way. Let's take a look at some of these physical differences. I found some pictures of the Diaz brothers where they have similar posture and the camera angle as well as the lighting is also similar. Although I'm not sure where I took a wrong turn in life and got stuck searching online for pictures of men without shirts on. The most important physical difference between the brothers I'd like to point out is that Nick is right-handed and Nate is left-handed. Both brothers fight predominantly southpaw in their fights, but Nick's lead hand is his dominant hand, while Nate's power hand is his dominant hand. We'll get into what this means for their fight styles in a minute, but make a mental note of that. There has always been fuckery going on with measuring the length and reach of fighters. The numbers you'll find online and on tail of the tapes aren't always accurate. But as far as I can tell, Nick and Nate are about dead even in both length as well as reach. The reason this is interesting is because Nate has fought most of his career at lightweight, while Nick has even fought up as high as middleweight. Relative to their opponents, Nate has always been much more of a tall, rangy fighter in his respective division. Although the size difference is not glaring, Nick carries a bit more muscle on his frame, which stands to reason with Nick being the heavier fighter. On Nick's torso, especially in his chest and his obliques, you can definitely notice a difference in mass. These physical differences carry over quite a bit to their differences in fight style. If we're talking striking offense, older Diaz brother Nick is a lead hand heavy fighter. Nick, being a right-handed southpaw, allows for his jab to land with quite some oomph, and his lead hook can be a serious fight ender. Nick prefers to move forward, work his way inside and throw digging shots to the body. Nick weaponizes his durability and endurance in quite a direct way. His forward pressure is never ending and he comes after your body with great determination. Nick's unique style puts opponents in quite a dilemma. He's right in your face, so you, as an opponent, are able to hit him as well. But if you tag Nick and expend energy to finish him, his chin and or excellent guard will most likely keep him in the fight. Now you're gassed out in a fight against an endurance fighter. But on the other hand, if you don't get Nick off you, he'll keep tagging you with shots and chip away at your gas tank anyway. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So keep in mind, Nick's stand-up game is all about keeping up pressure with his jabs, lead hooks and body shots. Younger brother Nate is much more of a ranger fighter and has built a game around his excellent 1-2, a left straight following a jab. Nate puts opponents on the end of his jab and pops them with a 1-2 over and over again. After the 1-2, Nate likes to lean back out of the opponent's striking range and get out of the way of shots. If opponents want to collapse that range and follow Nate, there's a check lead hook or Stockton slap ready to meet them coming in. Nate is less focused on tagging the body and is more of a headhunter. The benefit of this fight style is the amount of control it provides. Once Nate is in the flow of landing punches and getting out of the way, there are unspoken rules being established. You cannot close the distance without being tagged. You are too far away for a takedown. And each left hand that clatters on the opponent's chin solidifies these rules and diminishes the opponent's cognitive functions. So there's more to the brothers' difference in striking style than just a shot selection. Yes, Nick likes to lead hooks and the body shot, Nate the 1-2s, but their styles function very differently. Nick basically puts you in an energy draining hurricane that either leaves an opponent dead tired or knocked out on the canvas. The downside of this style is that Nick is in the hurricane himself, taking damage and leaving positional openings. Nate is much more of a controlled, measured approach, and consequently has the time and space to think inside that octagon. But Nate does not get his opponents tired and damaged as fast as Nick. Every decision you make and habit you have as a fighter has its benefits and drawbacks. Let's move on to the clinch. A lot of the same differences, is that a thing? Anyway, the same contrasts can be found in the brothers' clinch fighting and cage control games. You could say that Nick applies draining pressure and damage, which may result in the opponent giving up an advantageous position. And Nate actively looks for advantageous positions, which results in the opportunity to apply draining pressure and damage. It sounds the same, but they're actually opposites. Nick uses his constant forward pressure to get inside and is quite a traditional infighter. Head pressed against the opponent, freeing the hands and firing flurries of punches to the floating ribs. When talking about Nick's cage control, opponents get pressured with their backs to the fence because of the pressure of his style, but Nick isn't known for consistently and consciously cutting the cage. Dominant cage position is usually a consequence of his pressure. Nick spends some time pressing opponents against the cage and kneeing the thighs once he established cage control, but his main focus in the position is freeing his hands and find openings for the body shots. What makes Nick unique in close quarters, aside from his big focus on boxing up the body, is the way he deals with opponents' attempts to tie up. By Nick moving forward with his head pressed up on his opponents, he's always giving up opportunities to grab collar ties. And opponents love to apply the collar ties, hoping to get a break from the constant pressure. Nick is a master at keeping his posture and boxing from inside the double collar tie position. He always manages to bang the body and fire punches over the top of the collar ties. It was actually kind of hilarious going through all the footage and seeing all these fighters being beat up from a position considered advantageous. It's a ridiculous skill to have, really. Nathan is much more of a proactive cage cutter and actively positions his opponents in clinches against the cage. Once an opponent is against the cage, Nate has a very effective clinch game, looking for underhooks, overhooks and wrist control while simultaneously making use of openings to land punches. Nate's clinch game is systematic. There are specific positions you see Nate repeatedly put opponents in. A big focus of Nate's game against the cage is finding a home for the knee to the head. Nate's long frame allows his knee to reach the opponent's head rather easily, especially after forcing opponents to lean sideways with his head pressure. Aside from Nate's left straight, this knee in the clinch is his biggest damage dealer that lands consistently. The contrast can be seen in the brothers' clinch games. When Nick gets tied up because of his forward pressure and has over time built skills fighting out of these clinch positions, Nate is actively putting opponents in clinches and manifesting situations where he can land clean shots on his opponents. Nick once again focuses more on damaging the body and Nate on the head. Let's go to the next set of differences at a quicker pace. So the Diaz's rightfully aren't known for their kicking games, but both do make use of kicks. Nate's rangier style often leaves him at kicking range for long interludes of his fights. Opponents try to kick at his legs while keeping themselves a few inches outside the range of his 1-2s. Nate has developed a bit of a low kicking game of his own to deal with this problem, and also recently has been checking kicks more effectively. Nick kicks more often than his younger brother and tends to go high with his kicks. Nick kicks really relaxed with little power and just throws his leg up there. Even though Nick's kicks are definitely lacking the kind of power to shut someone's light out, Nick has good flexibility and randomly throwing a leg up there once in a while breaks up his boxing heavy rhythm. Both Diaz's games revolve around overwhelming with pressure over time. Opponents that get wise to what is going on and try to disengage to reserve their gas tanks need to be pulled back into the fire. The brothers do this task in different ways. Nate puts both hands on the top of his skull and shells up. Opponents that try to step in and try to hook around the shell get stung by Nate's classic lean back check hook. Nick puts his hands away from his body either to the side or up and basically taunts opponents into hitting him. Nick parries opponents that take the bait only to resume his usual forward pressure. So we've already touched on Diaz's excellent grappling credentials and I don't want to spend too much time going into detail here. Nate has a lot more finishes going for neck attacks, where Nick likes arm bars and kimuras. Nate initiates the grappling exchanges more so than his brother. Nate tends to drop to a single leg or takes the back off the pressure of his cage control game, where Nick usually starts playing guard only after being taken down. With that, we've reached the end of listing the differences between the brothers. By going through the fight footage for this video, it really became extremely clear how different the brothers are as fighters. It sounds completely out of touch to me to bring them up with their clones at this point. And it's not surprising that the games are so different. Nick started fighting all the way back in 2001 and was known as this pure jiu-jitsu fighter. Nick was surprising fighters with his unique set of skills and attributes. His entire game worked like this trap. One minute you're wondering why this BJJ fighter is engaging in a brawl with you, and the next minute you realize this was all a setup to drain your gas tank. But by then it was already far too late. A lot of Nick's career was fought against old school fighters, and Nick was not always put up against elite competition through his run in Strikeforce. Nick built a game that worked perfect against the opposition he faced, and his mature game didn't really start struggling until it was tested against top tier fighters like Carlos Condit and GSP, who could not only match his skills, but also fought with specific anti-Diaz game plans. Nate had the majority of his career in the lightweight division of the UFC, a stacked weight division with all killer no filler, as they say. Nate didn't have the same surprise factor as his brother, and was brought up in the fire of anti-Diaz game plans and well-rounded athletic opposition. This was the cause of a lot of L's on Nate's record, but also forced him to adapt. As we've gone over in detail in this video, Nick has many strengths that Nate does not possess, and vice versa. But Nate's game seems to be more adaptable overall and can definitely be considered to be more modern. In the end, both guys are very unique and interesting fighters. I would definitely recommend going through their fights and see if you can spot some of these differences for yourself. This was Concrete Breakdowns. Thank you for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe to watch more unique breakdown videos.